What's up, you guys? Your friendly neighborhood Toybiz here, bringing you an awesome video today. We're totally going to be checking out the original 90s Toybiz Spider-Man, the animated series, Wave 1. Yes, I've dived deep into my toy box and have pulled out all my original Spider-Man figures from the 90s, and I cannot wait to show them off. My big plans is to do every single wave of figures that I have, and between you and I, that's pretty much all of them. We're going to look at each one, what made them rock, what made them tick, all the accessories, all the goodness that came with it, and maybe a couple stories here and there of having to acquire, in some cases, these hard-to-find figures. So, sit back, relax. This will be Wave 1 of the 1990s Toybiz Spider-Man, the animated series. And while I got you guys here, I just want to say thanks so much for watching my RETRO-SHIZ video. If you like it, make sure to hit the like button. Also, be sure to leave a comment. Let's talk some toys. If you can, make sure to subscribe because I got a heck of a lot more Spider-Man the Animated Series figures on the way. Now, of course, I have to show off my very first Spider-Man the Animated Series figure. This is the Web Racer Spider-Man, and it was one of those things where I had no idea these figures were actually coming out. You go to dinner, you're out with the family, and they're like, hey, you want to stop at Toys R Us? And we did, ended up picking him up along with Venom and Carnage, and this figure was just so much fun to me. Now, you'll see the obvious problems with such a figure. However, he is absolutely glorious. Just that 90s goodness that you see. There is no articulation up here. It's kind of like recent Hasbro figures. Haha, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But he did have a waist swivel, legs kicked out, and joints at the knees. His gimmick, much like a lot of the Spider-Man figures, was that you had this and this connected through a series in his body, and you would kind of sling him up like this and he would go down. Now, because I used to play the heck out of this thing, there's probably a little minuscule knot in this, but it kind of still works, kind of, sort of, but not as much as he just used to race down these. So it's a bummer that he doesn't actually work anymore. However, everything on him, I mean, for as much as I threw this thing around and play with it, he has pretty much survived the torment of a child's figure. A couple little hiccups here and there, but overall, just an excellent figure to have, and I definitely love it. Next up is Alistair Smythe, or just as the packaging you would say, Smythe. If you watched Spider-Man the Animated Series, you would know that, for the most part, Smythe appeared as a human in his little wheelchair. That was the whole basis that he was helping the Kingpin throughout the entirety of the series, and it wasn't until the end they had a bit of a falling out, and that the Kingpin finally transformed him into this with the help of Langdon. Not really something he wanted to do, unlike the comics. But I believe what happened was he was just sort of hitting the comic books in this sort of attire. Probably maybe had some plans to do this to Smythe a lot earlier, but it wasn't until later when they put him in the animated series. But it wasn't exactly what it was in the comics. It was very, very animated series-esque. They changed a lot of things. This guy was the peg warmer of Wave 1, no doubt. I mean, to be honest with you, what exactly am I looking at if you didn't know Spider-Man lore and all that? And as a kid, I really didn't know that either. And he popped out of this chair and he looked like that. Now, he has no accessories, but I always joke that his ponytail was quite the accessory. And whenever I see these figures online or for sale or anything, he never has his ponytail. He does have some really interesting sculpting to him with the little jagged things that come out of his shoulders. He has a very tiny body. You know, it's like very smashed right here and then very long legs. Every Smythe I ever saw, he's got this thing where it's almost like a Masters of the Universe type thing, but it's just a very loose leg system. So not exactly the best standard and everything. His gimmick, if you kind of put his 90s ponytail up, is that you would push the lever right here on his back, and as you can see, he would punch. But like I said, he's very 90s, very Spider-Man. And while he did shelf warm, peg warm, and everything else, it's still a pretty rad figure to have after all these years. Next up is Dr. Otto Octavius, aka Doc Ock. Toybiz absolutely nailed it just in terms of the aesthetics of the figure while incorporating a really nice play feature. This was a very distinct departure from what many knew as Doc Ock. They gave him an accent, but he was no longer just this goofball. He was dangerous. He was intense. And for the action figure, the really distinct orange and green, I think that really made him stand out, especially in the very first cartoon that he appeared in when he basically straps Felicia Hardy and Jonah Jameson to a rocket ship. You know, the coloring, the sculpting, everything on this figure is so simple, but it works so well. You got one open hand, one closed hand. He didn't come with any accessories, but like most of these figures, they did come with a badge. And I have all my badges. I will do another video showing off all the badges because those are pretty cool. But again, with the play feature for Otto Octavius, it was simply, you have these 4 arms, they all have a little cord inside, and all you'd simply do is you'd pull the tab in the back and it constricts the wires to kind of just do this thing where they just activate and looks like they're coming alive. Really simple tech back then, but for a kid it worked so well and it was a lot of fun. As far as articulation, you know, it was in the shoulders, he had joints at the elbow, nothing at the wrists or anything, kicked out, and then he had knees. The head rotated, which was nice. So just enough articulation as a child to get in a really nice pose to fight Spider-Man. The big baddie and the one everyone wanted to see ever since he showed up in the original opening title sequence, finally debuted in the Alien Costume Saga 3-parter. When that hit on Saturday morning, they did so many promo specials, so exciting. And it was a blast. It was so much fun. Seeing Venom, having grown up in the comics, see him animated was simply fantastic. The cartoon figure didn't disappoint either. Now, you have to think, I did play with this and he has survived the age of playing, but you know what? He's still near and dear to me. In the cartoons, they kind of separated him as they did in one of the first appearances. He was red on one side and blue on the other with the black. Just kind of highlighted him, made him pop a little bit more. They utilized that in the cartoon, but for the action figure, he stayed a jet black with the white spider and the mouth and everything else. The gimmick was where you would press his legs together and then all of a sudden, boom, his mouth would open up, much like a Ghostbusters figure. Nothing at the waist, articulation was in the arms, the elbows, the legs, and the knees, but he was a great Venom figure. To have Venom, to finally be able to play with your Spider-Man and a Venom and did a jaw-chomping action. And I do wish that his paint was a little bit better after all these years, but that just shows the love and appreciation that I had for him when playing with this Venom figure. And as Woody Harrelson said at the end of Venom, there will be carnage. And for the wave 1 of a Spider-Man series that hadn't introduced really any of these characters yet, to include Carnage and Venom, that is like a dream come true. But Carnage was something special, something different. Everyone knew who Maximum Carnage was. It was just a big event at that time and point in the 90s. He's one of those figures that he did come with a bunch of accessories, and he was actually available in a separate Maximum Carnage line that was mostly for comic book shops and everything else like that. I got him as obviously a part of the Spider-Man wave, and it wasn't until I hit Comic-Con that I actually even knew that they were doing a Maximum Carnage line with these figures. So with Carnage though, he actually turned out quite nicely. He's got this nice black and red motif going on. Really nice sculpted head to him. Rotated and everything. His arms moved, elbows, joints, knees. His gimmick was that he would turn at the waist, which you could kind of use this thing in the back, right? It's not the best. I guess, you know, you could also use it with your fingertip. I never did that. Either I went like this, or just the fact of you just turn his whole body. The cool part is that he's one of those characters that came with a lot of accessories. They simply just clipped on and looked like all his extra tendrils and mandibles and everything. This one was cool because it was kind of like just a splorch kind of thing, you know, some Carnage webbing or something like that coming off. But the best one, and will always be the best one, is his giant axe swinging Carnage. And they pretty much match the paint exactly to this. I mean, you could totally tell on the back, it's just a flat red. I wish they would have put black underneath, but this was back in the day, man. This is stuff that really wouldn't fly. It sometimes does still fly, but you can't beat that. This was so much fun. And Carnage was just a glorious character to play with your Spider-Man collection. And of course, this leads us into one of the biggest mysteries that ever plagued the Spider-Man the Animated Series. No one knew who the Hobgoblin was, and for purists of the comic and everything, everyone knew that the Green Goblin obviously came before the Hobgoblin. Interesting story, though. Avi Arad, who was in charge of Toybiz back in the day, had already said and made the figure of the Hobgoblin for the toy line, so he requested, and by requested I mean do it or get out, that John Semper include the Hobgoblin so that he could sell the toy. Gotta say though, they nailed the look of the Hobgoblin in the cartoon. He came with 2 accessories basically and had a lot of play feature to him. He had his obvious Goblin glider, which was really nicely sculpted, I have to say. This was a heavy plastic. I did put the sticker on the bottom of mine. My brother had one as well, and to keep ours apart, I ended up putting one of these stickers on the bottom because, you know, obsession and all that. You could actually see all the great circuitry and everything that they included on the sculpt of this thing. Nothing really on the backside, but didn't really stand that well, but it made it so that you could zoom them around and kids could hold onto this base. The gimmick for the glider was that if you just undid this long string, popped this into here, and pulled this trigger, it would shoot out, and that was so much fun to do, man. That was awesome, and the best part was that he fits so well on the glider. Now, the second part is that he came with this separate, tiny pumpkin bomb. Good luck finding that when it hits the carpet. What you do is a tiny little hole in his hand, and he would put the tip of the pumpkin in, and then you could launch his hand up, and he would throw the pumpkin bomb, essentially. Yeah, it worked a lot better, I remember back in the day. His cape was a second part that you could remove if you wanted, and he had everything sculpted nicely. I mean, you can't ask for more in a Hobgoblin figure. There were later Hobgoblin figures, which we will get to, but this one always stands out to me as one of the best Hobgoblin figures that has ever been made. And all you do is he has the little boots right here. They have a little bit of a tip to each one. You kind of stick them underneath the little holders and he would just glide around. It was a great figure to have, and the Hobgoblin still is one of my favorite characters from Spider-Man the Animated Series, also being that Mark Hamill voiced him. And then finally we have the last of the Wave 1 of the Spider-Man the Animated Series, the one and only, the Spider-Man that was the most Spider-Man of the entire wave, the web shooter Spider-Man. Now, this one was the closest thing you could have to an animated Spider-Man when these first came out. And of course, his gimmick was that he had a web device in his little hand, right? Which is kind of popping out after a while. And there was a little trigger underneath. And if you held it just right, boom, it would shoot out. It used to go a lot longer. But again, knots and everything are preventing this from continuing. Man, oh man, I swear, the knots just don't give me string. This is why I can't have nice things. It's a great Spider-Man in terms of all the webbing being is fixed. It's a nice glossy blue and red Spider-Man. I always like the colors. The head rotated. He had shoulder. Nothing at the elbow, of course, on this one because that's where the device was. His legs kicked out. He had knees and all that great stuff. But even on the back and everything, you know, couple minor blemishes from play, but overall he's still in pretty good condition, and I love him. You just put that in his hand, you'd web thwip it out, and it was so much fun to set these things up and play with them day after day. So in closing, I have to say these are a fantastic toy line to collect. Wave 1 was filled with so many memories for me, so many days of traveling to the store. A lot of times back in that day, Kmart, Toys R Us, sometimes Target, but KB Toys, as we'll see in later waves when I do the next ones coming up, that KB Toys was the secret place to find a lot of these figures that were hard to find back in the day. So I hope you guys enjoyed this look at Wave 1 of Spider-Man the Animated Series. Which was your favorite figure? Which one did you have? Did you have the set? Which one invokes the most memories? I want to know. Comment below. Let's talk some toys. They are so much fun to see them all together, even after all these years, complete and everything else. They mean the absolute world to me, and I love having them on my shelf. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. As always, drink some great coffee, eat some great food, but most importantly, if you think Wave 1 is great, just wait until we get into the later waves. And when you do, let me know what you found. I'll talk to you guys soon. Adios.